something is relevant or important. And finally, you have your thesis statement. The thesis statement, again, helps to provide the scope of your essay, and it gives your readers the position and attitude that you have towards the particular topic that you're writing about. Recognize that when you're thinking about thesis statements, again, they help to provide for your reader the answer to the question, what am I trying to prove or show? So if you can't answer that for yourself, then you know your reader's going to have a hard time being able to articulate that or understand that as they read your text. So recognize that thesis statements are very important. They are, in fact, the most important thing in your essay. And we're going to talk about thesis statements quite a bit more in another video, but I just want to make sure that I underscore that. You might also recognize the fact that thesis statements can also help you to determine the organization of your essay. And as we get into thesis statements, we'll speak on that quite a bit more. But there are several things that a thesis is not, and even though we're using kind of negative language in this, you can see the other side of this. Obviously, thesis statements can be other things. So the first thing, a thesis is not vague. It is, in fact, very specific. We're going to know exactly what you're going to focus on in your essay as you write. A thesis is also not too broad or too narrow. A thesis that's too broad might end up being a book if you have worded it in such a way that we can't really hone down the focus enough to be specific in that essay. And whatever the scope of your essay happens to be, that's a consideration that you have to make when you're wording your thesis. A thesis is also never too narrow. If your thesis is way too narrow, then you might actually only be able to write about your particular topic for a paragraph, maybe two. And so if you have to write a longer essay, 5 to 10 pages, then you've got to recognize that too narrow a thesis will be just as detrimental as too broad a thesis. Also, a thesis is never a fact. Facts can't be thesis statements because facts can't be proven or shown. Facts are facts, so they can only be used as evidence to support something that you are trying to prove or show. All right? And so the reality is that if you use a fact like Will Smith was born on this date and this year, well, that can't be a thesis because there's nothing to argue. There's no discussion there. It is what it is. Finally, thesis statements cannot be announced. Anytime you have to make the statement, in this paper I'm going to write about, or this essay is going to focus on, what you've essentially done is announced yourself in the essay. That stylistically is just not a good idea. I do know that sometimes in certain disciplines, especially in the abstract, they will have a very general statement, this paper focuses on, but that in and of itself is a part of an abstract. It's not a part of the essay. And so we are working on academic essays that can be utilized in just about any avenue, any discipline within academia. So when you're thinking about those issues, you've got to understand that style is just as important as all the other content level areas. So let's take a look at an example of a completed introductory paragraph, because again, that's what this particular lesson is focused on, introductions. So let's see if we've got the 3 parts of the introduction. The 3 parts are, again, the hook, the bridge, and the thesis statement. And so you want to see if whether or not what we have here follows along with those parts. So I'll read it to you. The issue of sexual harassment has received a great deal of attention in recent years. From the highest offices of government to factories in small towns, sexual harassment cases have been tried in court and publicized on television for all Americans to see. Excuse me. This focus has been a good and necessary thing. However, when a first-grade boy makes national headlines for kissing a girl of the same age and the incident is labeled sexual harassment, the American public needs to take a serious look at the definition of this term. So let's see if the reader has given us something that will make us engage, that will make us want to read further. And so I have that underlined here. The issue of sexual harassment has received a great deal of attention in recent years. And whether or not you're interested in sexual harassment, you have to recognize that the hook is indeed designed to grab the reader's attention. It's not a perfect process. We're going to be working on those in class, and so some of your hooks will be highly successful. Some of them will kind of fall flat, but we'll, again, work on them because sometimes it's the wording, sometimes it's the topic, There's never really a perfect combination of these things. All right? But then you have the bridge, the next sentences. From the highest offices of government to factories in small towns, sexual harassment cases have been tried in court and publicized on television for all Americans to see. This focus has been a good and necessary thing. And so these sentences are designed to connect our hook with the focus of sexual harassment to our thesis statement. So if it's done that, if it's provided context, if we know the boundaries that we live in with regard to this particular paper, then we have our bridge. And so we know we're focusing on Americans. We know we're looking at sexual harassment as a particular issue. We know that it's been highly publicized, and so for most of what we've been discussing, it's been a good and necessary thing. So we have our context. We know why it's important, to whom it's important, where we're operating, when, okay, because we haven't always had television, so it's a little bit obvious in that regard. So we have an appropriate bridge. And then finally, we have our thesis that's underlined in red. However, when a first grade boy makes national headlines for kissing a girl of the same age and the incident is labeled sexual harassment, the American public needs to take a serious look at the definition of this term. We now have a thesis, because our thesis, again, lets us know our purpose for writing. This person is trying to prove or show that we need to look at our definition of the term sexual harassment. So they have a very clear understanding of where they're going with this. They know what they want to prove to their readers. They know what they want to show to their readers. And so this, in effect, is a successful introduction. So what have we learned today? We've learned the purpose and the role of introductions. We've learned that introductions themselves have three parts: the hook, the bridge, and the thesis, or our purpose for writing. We also know how this functions within the context of our writing overall, that if we don't create a successful introduction, it kind of makes it difficult to continue reading our text. And so we always want to make sure that we're making our readers engaged, that they want more and more and more until the very end. And even once it is ended, that they want to look further into it to see if they can have some sort of discourse or textual discussion with you. So your introduction, while it is indeed the beginning, it certainly doesn't indicate the end. It's one of our ways to continue reading, to continue discussing issues that are important, and to continue learning. So I hope you've learned a lot from this lesson today. If you have any questions, please see me in class. Thank you.